to be editor of the New York Times? Is he fit to be what we would think of as a journalist, a responsible journalist? If he looks at the picture, which may not have been exactly this hue when he looked at it, and said, make it navy blue, because that will really get at the subtext of consciousness at the moment. Now, if he had said that, would you fire him on the spot if you'd heard him, if you owned the New York Times? Because that seems to me to be a pretty disgraceful thing for an editor to do, to take a picture of a person or a body. It's not quite clear. It says it's a body in Port-au-Prince. One figure among the perhaps 100,000, perhaps 200,000 dead, and to make a popular image of that that will fit into the culture. Does the editor, it occurs to me, know enough about digital photo technology to know what the people who prepared the picture have done with it already? We touch here on an issue of great importance, I think, for this seminar, which is that film is always, has always been a medium that leans in towards a technology, an intricacy that many people, most people, do not begin to understand. That's never been more true than it is today. When films were photographic, people understood more or less how films were made. They still said, oh, how do they do that? Because films have always done things that we don't understand, even if we're quite skilled photographers. But now, there are things going on in the making of big popular films like Avatar that literally only a handful of people understand. I suspect, having seen the editor of the New York Times in interview, that he may have taken snapshots as a kid, but I don't believe he knows what happened with this picture. And this picture, it seems to me, more or less, and we could argue at length about this, it is a beautiful picture. And I'm not sure that a beautiful picture is a fitting thing for the New York Times to have on its front page, to note the visual aspect of a disaster, of an event that is beyond grasp, beyond treatment. But the editor of the New York Times can't say, this subject is beyond words and pictures, therefore we can't deal with it. We have got to report it. We have got to cover it. He puts a headline, which dramatically is almost like a caption from a silent picture. Hopes fade in quake-ravaged Haiti, and anger rises. Nothing in the stories beneath that headline suggests that the man who wrote the headline knows whether it's accurate or not. It's easier to feel that his hopes are fading because he feels helpless, because he feels the dilemma that we all feel of there, just over there in our famous global village, there is a disaster. It's in our hemisphere, but we can't even reach out to touch it, let alone know how to repair the jetties that were destroyed. the roads, or how to get people there quickly enough to go through the rubble of buildings looking for bodies. On the radio this morning, there was a commentary that said approximately this: the place seems to be crawling with journalists. Every television network, every radio network in the world has got people over there fast. When they're not telling us how they got people over there fast. Do all these networks have their own planes? Do they have their own airfields? At an airfield where apparently the planes are stacked up in the sky because there are so many, it's so difficult to land, and obviously the planes that are loaded with supplies and medicines and shelter and food and water ought to have priority. But those things are not getting in, but journalists are. And everybody said, talking about this on the radio this morning, and I haven't spent the entire week watching the coverage, that strange word that we have now, but the coverage is said to be extensive, which sort of makes you think these people are doing their job. No, I think they feel absolute chaos and helplessness. And I wonder, should journalists be sent on the planes? Or should food? Or, and I think back to that great Preston Sturges film, Sullivan's Travels. If you remember Sullivan's Travels, it's about a film director. Well, a very serious guy, but he seems to have a knack for making wonderful comedies, and one after another, so long as they had a little bit of sex in them, they've been huge successes. But it's not enough for this guy, Sullivan, played by Joel McRae. He wants to do something serious. He wants to have the power and the impact and the reach of the front page of the New York Times. He wants to get out to people. He wants to address serious things. And he knows that the world is full of hard times and hard places and misery and despair and a little bit of sex. And he says he's going to go off and tour America. He's going to see the real country, because he's lived in Hollywood most of his life. And he knows that Hollywood is not the real America. So he goes off on tour, and to cut a long story short, and in what is a very funny film for the most part, he ends up on a southern chain gang. Great warning to you if you plan to drive across America and tour the country, see those parts of life that are different from your own. Think very hard about what chain gang life is like first, because that could be where you end up. He's having a terrible time on the chain gang, although only terrible according to what Paramount would have presented in 1941. In other words, there's a great deal of the actions that might have gone on in the southern chain gang that are spared the audience in the film. But he's unshaven, and he's despondent, and he's not having a good time. And every Sunday, he discovers the prisoners get marched off to some little church locally, and they're shown a movie. It's Mickey Mouse, as I remember. And they all start laughing. These terrible roughneck extras that they brought in to be the prisoners, the ugliest men in town, all looking worse than Wallace Beery, if you know what I mean. They're brought into town and they are the prisoners, and they've been doing horrible things to each other, and they're only in prison because they did terrible things to someone. And they all start laughing at Mickey Mouse. And if that film and that conclusion has a point, and I think and hope it does, then I wonder whether we shouldn't, in all honesty, send great entertainers. Again, now you may think this is in bad taste. I wonder if Barbra Streisand couldn't play Port-au-Prince.